What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Do Dissidents Podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
Thank you guys for joining us this Friday, November 11th, Veterans Day. I have a heartwarming Veterans Day story that I want to begin with. I was picking up a delivery order at Wendy's today. I do the gig work, for those who don't know. And so I'm in Wendy's, and there's this old couple waiting to order their food. One of them, the older man, has a sort of camo baseball cap with the U.S. Army logo as he's waiting to order his food. There was another older man who was eating his food who also had an Army hat on. And so the man who was eating his food saw this guy's hat, and he thought he would be friendly on Veterans Day. He got up and he said, "Excuse me, sir." He says, were you in the service? He was very, very clearly trying to have a moment. Maybe he was in the service, or maybe he just wanted to thank him for his service. Like, "Excuse me, sir, were you in the service?" And the old man with the hat says, "No, I wasn't. Now back off."
Like, see, maybe he would have bought him something, man. He should have been like, yeah, things were tough, not that offensive.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was out of line. I mean, the guy was clearly trying to be nice, and he jumped
insulted
right down
him a
his
little
throat.
bit. You got a little out of order yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it was really something. Really something. But anyway, that's the mood everybody's in. The weather here is horrible in New York, by the way. If we have stream issues, that's why. There's a tiny possibility that I might lose power and or internet, since we are in the path of a tropical storm here. So we're taking a chance coming at you guys at 4 p.m. here on Friday.
And then I'll finally be able to do the show I've always wanted to do.
Yeah,
Broadway medleys, baby.
Right, exactly. If I disappear, it'll be up to Russell. Russell, you see in the top right corner.
Geese and ducks gonna scurry when.
Yeah. If I get whacked by the weather, Russell, you see in the top right-hand corner where it says end broadcast.
Yeah.
You hit that button to go off the air. So you could stay on for, as long as you want. And then when you're done, just hit end, and that's it. All right. That's
I'm gonna treat it as an extended therapy session. If you go off, I'm gonna start talking about my childhood and trauma and the worst things that ever happened to me. By the end, I'm gonna be a weeping mess.
Well, we'll hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Kevin, thank you for the compliment. Kevin liked my new article that I put out on our Substack called "America's Normie Nightmare." And I encourage you all to read that. Sign up for our Substack. And thank you for the compliment, Kevin. Kevin is a paid Substack subscriber. And we want to begin the show here by just putting our patron scroll across the bottom of the screen. Thank you to all of our patrons who make this show possible. We got your first names and last initials there, in case anybody wants to remain hireable and they don't want to be associated with helping fund this show. So
let's go. Guys. Brandon.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so thank you guys. You can sign up at patreon.com/do dissidents to support the show. Kevin is a paid Substack subscriber, so we thank you, Kevin, for your support. And thank you. I'm glad you dug the article. And yes,
it was very good. It was very good. I was impressed.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I banged that out last night.
Every time you drop a really good article, it makes me feel guilty that I haven't written an article.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was an article that we've kind of been talking about for a few days, so it was a little easier to write because we've been sort of hashing out the ideas live on the air for the last week. But anyway, we will get to a little bit of midterm stuff, actually. We did a whole week of midterm coverage. We produced overall about 16 hours of midterm content, and we were live with our friends at the Indie News Network. When was that? That was 2 nights ago. Feels like a long time ago, man. I have not been sleeping much this week.
Look, Shane's doing our job. He's busking for us. That's right.
So
sign up on Rumble. Once we get to 100, we can stream there. And really, the purpose of that is so that we have a lifeboat for when YouTube inevitably cancels us.
Yeah. Or we can start doing Rumble exclusive segments where we're allowed to talk about shit that we can't talk about.
Right.
Here. Yeah, right, because there's some shit we get, and I don't know how this is going to work, because with Trump running again, some shit is going to come up that we're not supposed to talk about. That's even going to happen right now as we start a segment. Well, not right now. We're going to do one mini segment first, but we will get to that in a moment. But there is some news.
Well, look at what we had to add.
Well, that's right.
Right?
I'm gonna introduce that sound drop. Our new sound drop. I'm gonna have to introduce when we do our Trump segment. But before we do that, there is some breaking news that came across the wire just a number of hours ago. A Texas judge named Mark Pittman has ruled Joe Biden's student debt cancellation executive order as unconstitutional, and so applications are currently suspended. What timing on that? Right after the election, man. These Democrats get break after break after break, and so now after the youth vote came out big for Democrats because of the student loan thing, now there is some question as to how or if or when that will move forward. And Joe Biden, used as justification for that executive action the HEROES Act, which was some COVID-related measure, when he could have just as easily invoked the Higher Education Act of 1965 as justification for canceling that debt, in which case it would have been legally pretty foolproof. Now, that being said, this does renew pressure on the White House to extend the moratorium on student loan payments, because the White House announced that moratorium was going to expire December 31st of this year. So come 2023, federal loan payments were going to be back on. Now that this wrench has been thrown into the student debt cancellation plan, people are saying, well, why not just extend the moratorium? And that's a great point, because technically Biden could not cancel student debt, but just postpone student debt repayment indefinitely. Or he could set a date. He could say, hey, student loan payments
make it
are
100 years.
Right, 100 years. 100 years, right? Student loan payments will begin again, January 1st, 2135.
Right.
That's not canceling.
Right.
You're just putting it off. Right? He's kicking the can down the road. He's allowed to do that. And that's the best way to handle this, honestly. Like, that's the simplest and the easiest way to handle it.
Yes, and a lot of it, but they'll never do that. And some people actually said when he did it this way, rather than to use the Education Act from 1965, that people who lawyers said that was really the foolproof direction to go in. There's no real ambiguity in the language there about the president's right to cancel student debt. Whereas with the HEROES Act, it was always more dicey to do it under that. Some said they don't want it to succeed. They want to be able to blame Republicans, and now you need to vote for more Democrats because look what they we need a filibuster-proof majority so we can pass this into Congress. Like maybe it was all a scam. Maybe they never intended to do it in the first place. Right. Why did they use that? Why didn't they use the more solid legal basis? There doesn't seem to be any good reason that they did it this way.
Yeah, except maybe they were going for another, Senate parliamentarian switcheroo there. Exactly. Here's something we can blame it on.
The gosh darn parliamentarian.
Right, exactly.
That's
possible. That's possible, but now there needs to be pressure to extend it further. They just have to extend it. There's no reason why they can't do that.
No, sure. And then, okay, so we can't do it this way. We're going Star Trek, bitch. 500 years. They'll be on the fucking Enterprise by the time people start paying loans again.
Right, exactly.
Look, all you have to do is delay it 20 years because by that time, civilization's going to collapse. The infrastructure to enforce student loans will be gone anyway.
Right, exactly.
Just extend it past 2040. We're good. People will be too busy fighting off the mutant rats to be worrying about student loans.
All right. Well, let's get into our scheduled content this afternoon. Obviously, we all know how the midterms went. There was no red wave. A lot of Donald Trump's candidates, both in governor's races and Senate races, really shit the bed and failed to, unite the Republican base with independent voters. A lot of independents swung Democrat in a lot of these key races. So it was a terrible night for Donald Trump, who injected himself into these primaries, which was a big gamble that did not pay off because his candidates did not do well. Ron DeSantis down in Florida, on the other hand, executed the very strategy that a lot of the Trump candidates hoped to, which is drive turnout in major urban areas, chip into Democrat margins there, drive up votes amongst non-white voters to chip into Democrat margins there, and run up good, healthy margins in the rural areas to sort of shore up that base. That's what Ron was able to do. Don's candidates were not able to do that, and so now all over right-wing media, including a lot of Murdoch outlets, which we're going to hear about in a second, Ron DeSantis is being talked about as the new leader of the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is being talked about as yesterday's news. And there's very good reason for that. We have results in, right? Once the people vote, now you get a sense of where you're at. And this is where people are at. But where we're also at is we are at the time we're doing this, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 5 days from Donald Trump announcing he is running for president again. And so he decided to put out a statement attacking Ron DeSantis. And this is really fantastic stuff here. Statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th president of the United States. News Corps, which is Fox, the Wall Street Journal, and the no longer great New York Post.
No longer. I love that.
Bring back Cole. Who is Cole? That must have been some other guy, right? Who used to run the Post before Murdoch bought it, I would assume.
So.
I don't know who that is. Yeah, see, Trump is a New York guy, so he knows all these names, right? And he's been on page 6 for as long as he's basically been alive. New York Post is all in for Governor Ron DeSanctimonious, an average Republican governor with great public relations who didn't have to close up his state, but did, unlike other Republican governors, whose overall numbers for a Republican were just average, middle of the pack, including COVID, and who has the advantage of sunshine, where people from badly run states up north would just go no matter who the governor was, just like I did. You know, one thing, you could tell he writes these himself. You could tell he does not have
this one, yeah. Well, sometimes they're ghost written, and you can tell the difference.
No, yeah, this one is verified. This one would get the blue check whether he would have to pay for it or not.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, this is all him right here. Ron came to me in desperate shape in 2017. He was politically dead, losing in a landslide to a very good agriculture commissioner, Adam Putnam, who was loaded up with cash and had great poll numbers. Ron had low approval, bad polls, and no money, but he said that if I would endorse him, he could win. I love how he puts the capital E on endorse, you know. I didn't know Adam, so I said, let's give it a shot, Ron. When I endorsed him, it was as though, to use a bad term, a nuclear weapon went off.
Well, that's such a demonstration of how fundamentally stupid he is.
Yeah.
Just the whole thought process there. Yes, well, I know saying nuclear is a bad term, so I'm going to say bad. Yeah, I know it's bad. See, I know that,
Right.
but I'm going to say it, but I'm going to show that I know it's bad, so I'm going to say bad term. Like, it's just dumb.
I know this is
That's
a bad metaphor
fundamentally
and
dumb.
bad writing, but I'm going to use it anyway because I'm too lazy to think of something better. Years later, they were the exact words that Adam Putnam used in describing Ron's endorsement. He said, I went from having it made with no competition to immediately getting absolutely clobbered after your endorsement. I then got Ron by the star of the Democrat Party, Andrew Gillum, this is my favorite line, parentheses, who was later revealed to be a crackhead.
Two separate words.
Crackhead. Well, this is great.
Separate words.
Two separate words, crackhead. Two separate words.
Head.
Right. Capitalized crack, capitalized H on head, and quote marks. A crackhead. this is a working man's Shakespeare right here. You know, Shakespeare
really
took
is.
these same kind of liberties with the language, you know, misspelling words, using punctuation in unconventional ways. A crackhead.
Well,
What was it?
they make fun
Go
of him
prick
now,
thy
but
face, thou,
Co-
lily-livered crackhead.
Kofeve will be part of the language one day.
Exactly. Right. He'll coin words and phrases. I got Ron by the star of the Democrat Party, who was later revealed to be a crackhead, by having 2 massive rallies with tens of thousands of people at each one. I also fixed his campaign, which had completely fallen apart. I was all in for Ron, and he beat Gillum. All right, here we go. But after the race, when votes were being by the corrupt process in Broward County, and Ron was going down 10,000 votes a day, along with now Senator Rick Scott, I sent in the FBI and the U.S. attorneys, and the immediately ended just prior to them running out of the votes necessary to win. I stopped his from being... See? I mean, YouTube's going to have to do something about these rules, because if Trump's going to run, we're going to have to talk about this. I mean, he's talking. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this?
They'll just fuck with the poor schmucks like us, and they'll let CNN do whatever they want.
That's what I mean. Well, that's why we're one step ahead of them. We got...
That's right.
That's why we cover our ass here. You're not going to outsmart two Jews in this way. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing.
Well, that's why they put us in control of the media.
If there's one thing we know how to do, it's cover our ass.
Yeah.
And now Ron DeSanctimonious is playing games. The fake news asks him if he's going to run if President Trump runs, and he says, I'm only focused on the governor's race. I'm not looking to the future. Well, in terms of loyalty and class, that's really not the right answer. In terms of loyalty and class, that's really not
because two qualities Trump is known for.
Yeah, if there's 2 qualities Trump is known for, it's loyalty and class.
Yeah.
This is just like the 2015 and 2016 a media assault collusion, when Fox News fought me to the end until I won, and then they couldn't have been nicer or more supportive. The Wall Street Journal...
True.
That is true. No, he's right about that. The Wall Street Journal loved low-energy Jeb Bush and a succession of other people as they rapidly disappeared from sight, finally falling in line with me after I easily knocked them out one by one. We're in exactly the same position now. They will keep coming after us, MAGA, but ultimately we will win. Put America first and make America great again.
It's very inspirational.
Yeah.
I like the way all caps at the end, make America great again.
Yeah,
I love when you look at his writing on the page, it really is like the craziest fuck you might debate on social media. The way he uses all caps, weird capitalizations, the weird line breaks, it's like a crazy bastard you'd be debating.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
My overall read, I think I texted this to you today. I forgot, man. I got to get on Predict It. I got to place that bet. I'm going to wait. Actually, this is going to be my timing. And
we're not encouraging anybody else
I
to
was
do it.
just going to say, this is not financial advice. I'm not advising anybody to do this. The day that Trump announces, that's going to be the best day to buy DeSantis. Because there will just be that little knee-jerk bump on Trump's odds when he announces. Boom. I'm buying DeSantis that day. Because Trump's done. He's done. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say it, man. He's done. The way that his candidates performed here, combined with the fact I think people are really underestimating how savvy Ron DeSantis is. He has set him up to take on Trump for years. You're not only going to have a lot of the Republican base. Ron DeSantis is a Republican that these fucking never Trump people can get behind, right? They're all going to come home to the Republican Party. They don't want to be Democrats. They want to be Republicans. They need a Republican who's not Donald Trump. DeSantis is going to be able to have it both ways. Because of his cultural stance, he'll peel off a lot of the MAGA people who are like, I don't want to lose. They don't like to lose. They want to win. They want to win. And Trump is looking more and more like a loser. He can't, his whole brand is I win. All right. So he lost that. That's why he has gone with this stop the steal thing. He's not wrong about that his brand is so fundamentally tied
Make sure you remember it's the there we go.
Yeah, it's so tied. Well, I think we could say that, right? Because
we can.
We're not. Yeah.
Let's just get in the habit, Let's make this work for us.
Yeah, let me make something clear because Mothra here is DeSantis is going to start all kinds of wars. Listen, given what's going on now, I don't think we can really call that a Republican phenomena. I think the Democrats are as likely, if not more likely, to get us into wars. So that's not an argument. But, when I make these predictions, sometimes people think we're supporting DeSantis. This isn't about support. It's about analysis. I'm saying that Trump's moment has passed. And not only that, set all this aside, everything else aside. I said this on our live stream. The deep state will whack Donald Trump before they will let him be the president again. If Donald Trump gets anywhere near the White House, he's going to have an accident. So Trump is not going to be the president again, by hook or by crook, period. He is not going to be the president again. So who will? Who's going to have that nomination? It's going to be Ron DeSantis.
Well, I was listening to a friend of the show, Michael Savage.
Perversion. It's sick. It's degenerate and sick.
Famous for lines like
a
that.
A trans with a schmendrick swinging it in a girl's bathroom.
Those are some of his finest quotes there on air. But I was listening to his podcast this afternoon because I was very curious how he responded to the midterms because he was the first right-wing media guy to back Trump. He backed Trump the day Trump announced he was running. He said, "I'm for Trump," and he's right when he says he was the only one at the time because none of the Fox News
nobody
took
him seriously.
Right. Yeah. Savage even said he thinks that DeSantis is now the future of the party because of these results, because DeSantis proved he could win on Tuesday, and Trump, really gave the impression that his movement is running on fumes. That was the exact phrase that I used in my Substack article, right? I mean, the movement is just, it doesn't have what it had in 2016. There's no way it really could. There's no way to recreate that magic. Just like the sequels are never as good as the original movie because it's something new. Right. It has that
It
novelty.
Was new. Nobody had ever seen a guy go on stage and treat the fellow candidates in a primary that way.
Right.
But now that's going to be old hat. And also he had the advantage of running against a bunch of clowns. Jeb Bush, Chris Christie. Ron DeSantis is not those people. Like I've said this all along, even back then. The idea that Trump has some kind of mojo magic that makes him win elections was bullshit. He was running against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton. Pretty much anyone with more credibility than Hillary Clinton would have beaten him. He was a lucky motherfucker. He was lucky in his enemies. He's always been lucky in his enemies. And I'm saying when you're talking about Ron DeSantis, his luck runs out because, listen, we've been living in this post-Trump world since 2016. We're forgetting that all these establishment Republicans who have ensconced themselves on MSNBC are fundamentally Republicans. As soon as you give them the option of a credible Republican who's not Donald Trump, they're all coming home to the party. All these never Trump Republicans,
some of them are making too much money.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, Nicole Wallace, she'll be over there. But in the end,
like David Frum, a guy like that, yeah, he's probably going to go for.
They're going to come home. They're going to come back to DeSantis, and it's going to reunify the wings of the Republican Party. A DeSantis candidacy will bring a lot of the MAGA people are quietly saying, like voters, yeah, I like Trump, but it's time for somebody else. They don't want to lose. They know Trump comes with too much baggage, not to mention the fact they're going to indict him any minute. And again, the Republicans are not like the Democrats. Oh, Hillary's being investigated by the FBI. What could possibly go wrong?
Right.
Republicans are not like that. They're going to be like, man, this motherfucker is being indicted. We want to win. And DeSantis is not Mitt Romney. He is acceptable. He will be acceptable to Trump's base.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. The thing is they want to win. That's what it all comes down to. And the argument for Trump 2024 was that he could win. He's won before. Even though he lost in 2020, he got 75 million votes. That's a lot of votes. That's a very impressive showing. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is, well, we don't really have anybody better. He brings out the base like no one else. He drives turnout on our side like no one else. So let's ride our horse as far as that horse will take us. That made sense in theory, and it would have made a lot more sense if Walker was able to win on Tuesday, right? If Oz was able to win on Tuesday, Kerry Lake, Blake Masters, if they were all racking up 52, 53, 54% of the vote and putting these Democrats away, then you'd have no GOP primary because Trump's theory of the case would have been proven right. Trumpism would be back, and that would be it, right? But that's not how it happened. It happened almost the complete opposite of that. The only Trump candidate who had any real success on Tuesday was J.D. Vance, and even J.D. Vance, as I mentioned on our Indie News Network live stream, he polled about 18 points behind Mike DeWine, the Republican governor running in Ohio. You had 18% of Ohio voters voted for DeWine for governor, but voted for Tim Ryan for senator. So even Vance, who was the best of them, really shit the bed. He polled well behind the non-MAGA candidate. And so that's it. That's it. I mean, game day is game day. You got to win on game day. You don't win on game day, you go home, right? And so that's where they're at now.
What I see happening is he's going to make his big announcement on Tuesday, and he's going to try to throw the ick onto DeSantis. I just don't think it's going to work because he's playing a weak hand. As you say, it would have been over if his candidates had cleaned up.
His hand is, I saved you from the agriculture commissioner who was raising a lot of money, and now you have no loyalty and no class because you want to run now. Like, that's his only argument.
And Ron DeSanctimonious, it just doesn't have the low energy Jeb Bush.
No, it's not. No, it
doesn't work.
It's
doesn't
not
really
Lion Ted,
work.
Little Marco. Yeah, no.
It doesn't really fit. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. Like, what are you talking about? He's sanctimonious. What are you talking about? Like, the culture war postures he takes are very popular with your own base. So what are you criticizing him for being sanctimonious about exactly?
Yeah, he should have just gone totally blue. He should have just called him like demand tits.
Yeah.
You ever see him without his shirt on? Little estrogen buildup in the chest there.
That's not a real man.
That's not a real man. Yeah, exactly.
That's not a man. Instead of fighting Disney, he should be joining them. He should be in their films.
Right, he should be working for Disney.
He should be in The Little Mermaid.
He talks a good game with all this woke stuff. Meanwhile, he's not a man.
He's not a real man.
When is he starting puberty blockers? When you starting puberty blockers, Ron? Why don't you go work at Disney? Why don't you go check tickets at the Disney kiosk?
I mean, at that point, what does he have to lose, right?
Yeah. Well, that would actually have the benefit of being funny. This is just kind of awkward.
It's weird. It's like it's definitely the sequel that is a pale shadow of the original.
Exactly.
Like right down to that, the fact that he couldn't really find a good nickname. But again, I say that's partly the quality of the candidate he's coming up against. Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush. I mean, come on, man. You couldn't have a better target for a guy like Trump.
Well, you could tell he's off his game because DeSantis is not a good name to make a funny nickname out of. He should have gone with the first name, Ron, because you could always say, like Lion Ted wasn't particularly clever, but it had rhythm. Right. Lion Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, something Ron. Classless Ron, whatever,
Yeah, I just don't think any of that sticks with him. That's the problem.
Ron. Yeah, rip off Ron. There you go. That would have been a decent one. Rip off Ron.
But I still feel like, how are you going to make it stick?
Yeah, it's tough.
Because what did he do to justify it? What did he do to make that work? There's got to be some truth in it for it to really stick.
Yeah. Pretty proletarian. Careful. You're going to end up being hired by the campaign. Yeah. That'll be our new job. Derogatory nickname consultant. That'll be my title.
Just lock us in a room to brainstorm.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, so we have some more intra-party feuding that we want to get to, this time on the Democratic side. So Sean Patrick Maloney, the DCCC chair, in very embarrassing fashion, lost his race to represent New York's 17th district. Now, I've broken this down a bunch of times on this show. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely worthy of celebration. But what happened in the Hudson Valley here, in the mid-Hudson Valley.
That is the one motherfucker, because, I take all these people apart. But I said, hey, man, if I lived in Pennsylvania, I would have voted for Fetterman. But at the same time, I acknowledge that debate was a train wreck. Maloney's the only Democrat I was actively rooting against because it was so scummy what he did. He deserved to lose. I did not want to see that behavior rewarded.
Yeah, so I'll just run down the very brief version of this. Most of you guys have heard this already, but we are going to clip this. So what Maloney did was he represented the 18th District of New York, which is where I live. And his district was redrawn, and turns out his house was then located in what was technically the new 17th district, which was Mondaire Jones's district that he was serving in. And so Maloney, rather than either move into the 18th or run in the 18th anyway, because it's not mandated by law that you live in the district that you rep, Maloney decided he would have an easier time winning the 17th than the newly drawn 18th. And so he decided he's going to run in the 17th. That forced Mondaire Jones out because Mondaire Jones was afraid to primary him because he's the DCCC chair. He controls the money. Right. So Mondaire Jones left. He ran in New York's 10th. He lost his primary, so that's it. He's done. He's out. All right. Maloney wins the New York 17th primary. Pat Ryan ran for Congress in the 19th district over the summer to fill the vacated seat that was left open by Antonio Delgado, who went to be lieutenant governor. Ryan won that race, serving in the 19th. So now you had a situation where Ryan was serving in the 19th, but running in the 18th in my district, and Josh Riley, a new recruit, ran in the 19th against Mark Molinaro. So, long story short, if Maloney didn't move, you would have Democrat incumbents running to defend the 17th, 18th, and the 19th. You would have had Pat Ryan running in the 19th as an incumbent, Maloney running in the 18th as an incumbent, and Mondaire Jones running in the 17th as an incumbent. Because Maloney moved, you had no Democratic incumbents running in any of those three districts. And as it turns out, 2 of those 3 districts were lost by Democrats. Maloney lost, and Josh Riley lost in the 19th. So, especially how things turned out, it's especially scummy because the Democrats now are looking at almost holding the House in this midterm. They might only lose the House by a couple of seats, in which case it is on Maloney, the guy whose job it was to secure the House majority. It'll be his fault, like literally his fault, if they lose it. And so it was just extraordinarily selfish of him to do that, and he got bit in the ass for it because he lost his race. And what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing to see.
Okay, yes. He well deserved it. Now, when we were doing our 8-hour live stream, God help us, I said the way the media is going to cover this, they are not going to talk about what he did. They're just going to avoid this subject. But it actually wound up being worse than that. There have been so far 2 rather lengthy articles talking about these House races and these losses that did not mention the fact that he knocked off Mondaire Jones and caused this whole musical chair shuffle that ultimately was the single biggest factor in these losses. They did whole analysis of specifically these House races without once talking about the fact that Maloney shifted districts. Now, this is an incredible real-time demonstration of manufacturing consent. When you wonder why the shit libs think of themselves as very informed, these people sit there with their fucking New York Times and they're always up on the latest Twitter trending topic and they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. This is why. Because they are intentionally misinformed. To read these articles, you would have no idea that any of that happened with Maloney. You're going to walk away spouting the talking points. The Newsweek one really wanted to talk about crime, right? They actually gave the Republicans most of the analysis time in that one. Oh, yeah, it's that crime. Mention nothing about what actually happened. Look, they're quoting Republican strategists. Now, this is manufacturing consent. I had a guy criticizing me about what I said about Fetterman's debate, who's telling me Fetterman's a regular guy. Where'd he get that from? He got that from the corporate media. Fetterman's not a regular guy. Fetterman grew up in a wealthy suburb. He went to Harvard. He's not a regular guy. That's an act that he puts on for the rubes. But you would never know that to read corporate media. You would think he came out of a fucking steel mill. That is not the reality. If this is where you get your information from, Crystal Ball says this a lot. Often it's not, look, Captain Obvious is saying it. That's exactly what I was just going to say. Lies of omission. Very often it's not that they're actually presenting factually false information, although they do that too, particularly where war is concerned. It depends on how high the stakes are. It depends on how much the establishment is trying to push a counter narrative to reality. But more often it's this. What they wrote in those articles is not factually untrue, but it's grossly incomplete to the point of the main issue is not mentioned. The thing that should be the main meat of those articles literally is never touched upon in either one of these pieces.
Which amazing. Is all these issues aside, you had the advantage of incumbency and you forfeited it.
Right.
Because you got greedy and thought you'd have an easier time in the 17th district. And in the process, you forced Mondaire Jones out of the House altogether.
Right. You fucked an incumbent.
And by the way, Pat Ryan beat Colin Schmidt in the 18th, in the district that Maloney vacated. Pat Ryan beat Colin Schmidt by 0.8 of a point. So it was within a point of being a clean Republican sweep in all three of these districts.
Right.
All three. And we're talking about a year where the Republicans might only win the House by 2 or 3 seats when all the counting is done.
Right.
So this
could
have been the whole ballgame.
They're never going to write the article that John Patrick Maloney is responsible for the Democrats losing the House. And most of your fucking party line, vote blue no matter who idiots are going to come away saying, well, it's those damn progressives and their cashless bail,
Right.
They'll have no idea that this happened. And, in the end, I blame the media. I also blame them for being completely incurious, right? I mean, how many times does the New York Times, does the corporate media have to be completely disastrously fucking wrong for you to start thinking about looking into some other sources of information? It's not like the old days, man. You don't have to go down to Union Square and find a fucking shaky junkie passing out a pamphlet, man. On the internet, you can find some very credible news sources that will give you another narrative.
Well, the New York Times interviewed Maloney after his loss, and Maloney, who is a right-wing sort of, third-way Clinton-era Democrat, had some choice words for AOC, who endorsed Alessandra Biaggi, who ran against Maloney in that primary. And so, look, people who know us by now know that we are no AOC stans, so this is not meant as a defense of AOC so much as it is just an indication of what a bitter fucking loser and worm this guy is. So let's read this. So the interviewer asked, there is a debate in New York right now about the New York Democratic Party, and Representative AOC and some on the left are arguing its leadership is part of the problem here. Is that a conversation you are a part of? Well, shouldn't be anymore because he's on his way out. So I don't know what. It was not a great question.
Oh, he'll be part of that conversation in whatever fucking revolving door job.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They'll hook him up
for whatever
somehow.
Favors he did for corporate donors.
Exactly. The last time I ran into AOC, he says, we were beating her endorsed candidate 2-1 in a primary, and I didn't see her 1 minute of these midterms helping our House majority. So I'm not sure what kind of advice she has, but I'm sure she'll be generous with it. But let's be clear, she had almost nothing to do with what turned out to be an historic defense of our majority. Didn't pay $1 of dues, didn't do anything for our frontline candidates except give them money when they didn't want it from her. There are other voices who should be heard, especially when suburban voters have clearly rejected the ideas that she's most associated with, from defunding the police on down. She's an important voice in our politics. I love how he says that. He just trashes her for 3 paragraphs and then says she's an important voice in our politics, right? Now, look, what he's talking about here, and look, this is somewhat true. And I had a feeling that my neck of the woods was going to go for Zeldin. I thought Schmidt would run very, very close to Ryan, if not beat him outright, which he almost did. I had a feeling these seats were going to perhaps flip. And the reason is because a lot of people who live up here are people who used to live in the city, and when they got some money, they decided they didn't want the city life. So they're a little more conservative, culturally speaking. They want their yard. They want their property, right? They always dreamed of getting out of the city and having a yard to maintain, right? And the idea of crime, like, they're they're fucking paranoid about that. And they consume a lot of New York City media because we're within an hour of the city. So we get the Post up here, we get the Daily News, the New York Times. So they're bombarded with headlines about crime. He is right about that. Like, he's not wrong in saying that, yes, those anti-crime messages hit particularly hard right here. He is wrong in the sense that I don't think AOC has been screaming about defunding recently. I don't know about that. But anyway, she's an important voice in our politics. But when it comes to passing our agenda through Congress or standing our ground on the political battlefield, she was nowhere to be found.
Fuck that fucking parakeet.
Yeah, I agree, Paulie Walnuts. Fuck that fucking parakeet. I added that one for today.
Yeah, that's where AOC, the game that she's playing is a losing game. So on the one hand, she wants to all Mama Bear Pelosi, but these people are never going to accept you. And now you've alienated a lot of the people who put you in power. Now you're not even particularly liked by your own base, by people like me who volunteered for her. So what are you trying to do, man? I mean, you might as well just sell out completely or be a gadfly. Pick a lane. She's trying to have it both ways. And at this point, I don't know what she is other than an Instagram influencer. That's it. It's politician as Instagram influencer, but not in a meaningful way, in a fucking road decision manicure kind of way, in a very superficial way.
But it's hilarious that, like, yes, I mean, everything you said there is true. And yet the argument that he's making is that she didn't rep the Democratic agenda. It was the progressives who fought hardest for Build Back Better. Then they caved, as we knew they would in the end. But they were with that from day one. It was the moderates who sabotaged the agenda that 90% of the Democrats voted for. All right? That's point number one. Point number two.
Yeah, you notice
AOC,
how he doesn't mention Manchin or Cinema.
Right. No
How
mention
about them
agenda.
as sabotaging the party?
Right. Exactly. No mention of them. Right. But number two, AOC could not and would not have done anything to sabotage the Democratic Party 10% of what Sean Patrick Maloney did by vacating his district. Like, that's
right.
Like, you're the one who sabotaged
He may have
the party
single-handedly given the House to
you
the
handed the Republicans 3 seats in a year where they might not win the House by 3 seats. You gave it to them because, look, despite what he's saying about all these issues, and I think he's right about these issues, but you know what? These issues did not only exist in the Hudson Valley region of New York. These issues existed almost everywhere throughout the country, and almost everywhere throughout the country, incumbents in this cycle were very difficult to knock off. And so you had 3 Democrat incumbents who could have held down the fort in these tough districts, and you fucked that all up by creating this musical chairs game, all because you thought that you could pull a few points ahead of where you were in the 18th by running in the 17th. And turned out that blew up in your face as well. So you got no argument here against AOC from that standpoint whatsoever. It's absurd. I mean, he's the last person who should be making any argument like this.
Right. To make an argument about AOC costing us seats.
Right.
Like, that's an abstract theoretical. You demonstrably cost at least 2 seats.
Right. Exactly. Right. Right. Exactly. That's just math. There's no theory involved in that.
But in the end, look, I mean, politician's gonna politician. I blame these fucking so-called journalists for not confronting.
Right, where was the follow-up there?
How the fuck do you literally interview the man and not ask him about, well, do you think changing districts had anything to do with this? How do you not ask that question? It's fucking stunning.
Yeah.
This is pretty funny from Rick Bungle.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw
Biden Fetterman 2024. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I saw somebody tweeted that. Maybe that was you, Rick Bungle. I forget what your Twitter name is, but yeah, yes, indeed.
And
That is
speaking of
funny.
which, we don't do this for love of the game. Cough up those fucking super chats, you motherfuckers.
You're only as good as your last envelope. You know that.
Yeah,
That's right. Cough it up. Cough it up. We need that. If we haven't seen your dad in a while. He used to get it going. He made everyone feel bad. He would drop a bill, and people would be like, well, I got to give him at least 5.
Yeah, exactly. My dad is actually in the DeSantis
boycotting
kingdom right
us?
now. He's in Florida. They just went down for a week.
Did he volunteer
I
for?
don't think
for
he's here.
Ron.
Yeah, right. No, he got invited. He got scored an invite.
He
to
was
the victory
door
party.
knocking for Ron.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Should we do our last segment of the evening?
We shall.
All right, let's get this going. So, Russell, I'll just toss to you. You can quarterback this one, and just this is one where Russell gave me a lot of materials to sort of bring together a lot of exhibits. This would have been a good segment to do on Indie News Network because those guys are epic with the amount of materials they gather. We did a 3.5-hour stream with them. They had 126 exhibits for a 3-hour show. I mean, they got their shit together when it comes to that.
I'm going for
it's like pulling teeth to get me to do
127.
anything. For me, it's like Russell's like, I really think we should use this. I'm like,
Yeah,
let's
he's
just
like,
talk about it.
can't we just talk about it? All right, I like that, Tom. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Thank you, Tom. All right, who's next with a $4.56?
I think there's some numerology there.
Thank you. Who's next with $4.56 and then $7.89?
Yeah, let's just keep working our way up.
Working it
So
up.
let's do a little Rain Man thing.
Yeah.
Where we just
Exactly.
keep working with the square root of pi.
Yeah. And get your donations in before this last segment because you're all going to be furious in a few minutes.
Yeah. No, they're not.
No,
I don't think anyone who watches us is going to be furious about this.
I'm
segment.
joking. No, it's honestly a huge difference. Like one of the great things about doing this on YouTube is that you expose yourself to a large variety of people with a large variety of points of view. Whereas like when we used to just stream these on Facebook, the only people who saw that were people who like us on Facebook. So, and those were basically all Bernie people because we built the show during the Bernie campaign. So like whenever we would do a segment like this, forget it. We would get, incoming like insane. Now I feel like the audience is a little more tolerant of segments like this and perhaps even accepting. Perhaps they even like them. So I hope you like
perhaps
it.
even supportive.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Just kind of gonna be the whole point of my segment. Yeah. Okay,
there's an outside chance you guys might actually like this segment.
Yeah, you can tell us in the chat.
Yeah,
in fact, you can tell us with a super chat.
Right, exactly.
Which we have a policy of definitely reading, unless we've never had anybody who dropped like a crazy like racist super chat. That would be a moral conundrum.
It would be a conundrum. Well, that's where we'd
have to give the money back.
Well, once again, so we got that for. See, now we're set with that.
Somebody complained. They said that's hurting their ears. I would advise them to go to DSA, where
the DSA podcast.
They
here, you know what? Here's the DSA version of that. Ready? See, low volume. I turned it down.
Low. Called us idiots. The best possible midterm elections wins for actual progressives were the ballot proposals. State after state, red state, purple state, blue state. Yep, that is true.
That's absolutely true. There was some single payer healthcare proposal on the ballot in Massachusetts, and
that passed all 20 counties.
Yeah, all 20 voted for that. So that was really that was a fantastic thing, and it's funny. I'll see if I can bring that up because I thought that was really hilarious. Because obviously it's great news that passed and that went through, but am I not going to be able to find it? I wish I were prepped to handle. Oh no, here it is right here. So. Oh, it was deleted by the author. Okay, so we can't show the graphic. I was going to show the graphic. But the graphic for the single-payer healthcare pitch in Massachusetts is a big graphic that says mass care. And, of course, mass care, when you first see it, visually it looks like massacre.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so when I saw the headline, I'm like, oh no, what happened? Was there a massacre? No. Oh no, mass care. So they need some branding. That needs some branding work. Mass care.
They don't have any Gen Zers working over there.
No.
All right, Captain Obvious. Even though you didn't attach it to a super chat, I'll read it. You want to kick in some of those super chats, or you want to walk around on some crutches tomorrow, you motherfuckers?
All right, we got to all of them, right? We got to Peter.
Yeah,
Another great show. Thanks, Peter.
did.
Thank you, Cool Blue. I appreciate that. All right, so go ahead.
Okay, so people have been desperately trying to make canceling Dave Chappelle a thing ever since the closer dropped. And I can't think of a better example of how out of touch our cultural elites are with the public. Because first of all, the closer is not what they're claiming the closer is. The closer is a very complicated comedy special that raises some very complicated issues. When you look at the story he tells about his transgender friend to close out the special, I don't see how anybody can come away from that saying the special was anti-trans. That is an extremely dishonest take. If you feel that it's anti-trans, what you're saying is that you cannot make jokes about the trans community. You cannot critique the trans community. You cannot ask questions about the intersection of race and sexuality, and ask questions about different levels of privilege and the ability to claim outsider status, but then to back off of that claim. I think that was one of the things that really upset activists. He had a bit where he was basically saying, well, if you're gay, you can be an oppressed minority when you want to be. Black people can't take that off.
He's saying how he got into an altercation with either a gay person or a trans person. They were white. And they threatened to call the cops.
Right.
And he's like,
exactly.
I can't threaten to call the cops, right? As a black guy. Right. And so he said, that was his line. He says, they want to be gay until it's time to be white again, or something like that.
Exactly. And hey, that is in the great tradition of the great social comedians that we've had going back to Lenny Bruce, forcing very uncomfortable conversations about social hypocrisy, about things that we don't want to talk about. Now, you don't have to agree with his point of view there, but if you don't agree with it, guess what you get to do? Argue with it, debate it. You don't try to ban it, and you don't try to cancel it.
Right. That was good. Or if you really don't like it, you could turn it off.
You could turn it off.
Right.
You don't tell other people they can't watch it.
Exactly.
They can't be exposed to it. And you don't make the dishonest argument of trying to tie Dave Chappelle to an anti-transgender right-wing agenda. That is not where he's coming from. And even if he was, you argue against it. You say that this is not right. Convince people with the strength of your argument, with the weight of your argument. This idea that people should not be exposed to ideas because they're too dangerous. The more that people who associate themselves with the left are connected to ideas like that, the more you empower the right wing, because most people don't like it. And especially when you're talking about Dave Chappelle, who is arguably, and in my opinion, the most important comic voice of his generation, you're barking up the wrong tree if you're going to try to force the public into a position where they have to cancel Dave Chappelle. And that's why this keeps failing. The media keeps trying to drum up a narrative that we're going to cancel Dave Chappelle, that there's a groundswell of people who want to cancel Dave Chappelle. And it keeps not panning out. So Matt Taibbi did a great piece on this about how all the media talked about how at least 1,000 people were going to walk out of Netflix in protest of the closer. Dozens walked out. So can we take a look at that?
Sure thing.
All right. So, in the end, a few dozen people actually ended up walking out of Netflix. But the media drummed it up like, oh my God, there's going to be this big walkout at Netflix. So this is the question. Who really thinks that Dave Chappelle did a transphobic special here? Who really believes this? Obviously, people who have a lot of control over media and the microphone and the spin. If you read any article on this, they will never describe it as some people believe his jokes were transphobic and homophobic. They will always state as a fact that people are upset because he made jokes that were transphobic and homophobic. They cut off the possibility of debate. So here Taibbi's talking about by Wednesday, October 20th, the day of the planned walkout, the story became it had originally been 1,000 Netflix employees.
And this was a year ago, by the way.
This is
October 2021.
The story became hundreds of Netflix employees and supporters are expected to show up. That was CNN. Then as the event started, it became hundreds of protesters stood in solidarity with Netflix employees. That's the Daily Beast. NBC told us hundreds rally outside Netflix. How many employees walked out? Not one news organization put the real number in a headline, and only a few had the guts to even tweet that the actual protest was reduced in the end to the famed Arrested Development meme. He's talking about the episode where Tobias screams, "There are dozens of us! Dozens!" Now, here's another thing that really exposes the whole hypocrisy of this movement. The person who led this protest was revealed to have dropped horrible, racist, and homophobic tweets and memes over and never got canceled from Twitter. This person is not. Why are we not demanding her cancellation? So we have a screenshot from a Matt Orfalea video. Ashley Marie Preston. Now, this is horrible, and I'm gonna say what she said. These are not my words. These are the words of the transgender activist who led the Netflix walkout of dozens. This is an actual tweet among many tweets that Matt Orfalea brought to light and put in a video. Just cuss that Asian bitch clean the fuck out. You mess up my order and then blame me. Hashtag English is my first language, bitch. Never ordering again. Now, the reason we have to do this as a screenshot is because YouTube.
It was actually Facebook that pulled it, not YouTube, as far as I understand.
I couldn't find it on YouTube.
Okay, so maybe they pulled that too.
I think YouTube pulled it also, and Reddit pulled it. Why? Isn't this an important fact that this transgender activist leading this, talking about how Dave Chappelle doesn't get to suck all the light out of it? What we do is pour equity into these spaces. Isn't that a legitimate journalistic endeavor to expose that this person is not only racist, but homophobic? There are other tweets where she's talking about, I don't want to repeat the word, but she's using very derogatory phrases for gay people, calling them furry slipper wearing fuckboys and, just really horrible stuff. So where are these people demanding that she get canceled? Where are they? All these people want to cancel Dave Chappelle. Where are they? Why don't they cancel this person? Whenever you have something that doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to promote, they're silent. They're silent. And a lot of people who are not in that bubble see that. So we have another example of this here where we had a news story that seemed to have gotten drummed up. And in fairness, it seems to have started on the right. It seems to have started at the Post. But all the usual suspects, the Daily Beast, Huffington Post, they all jumped right on this, CNN, that the writers at SNL are going to boycott because Dave Chappelle is hosting, as he traditionally does after elections. He's going to be hosting tomorrow. According to Chappelle's rep, and I don't think they would make this up, this is a total fabrication. And I also believe it because you'd have these virtue signaling motherfuckers would be tweeting out that they're boycotting. So if you don't have any tweets like that from the writers, they're not boycotting. It's bullshit.
That's upsetting to me because I was actually looking forward to this week's episode because between Chappelle hosting and the worst comedy writers in the history of show business boycotting, it would probably be a pretty funny show.
It would have actually probably helped the show if these fucking idiots boycotted.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like they're actually boycotting. But look, they all grabbed on that headline. Oh, some SNL writers are boycotting. All off the New York Post, right? Which they're supposed to have a certain disdain for, but you know, they like the story, they like the narrative, so they all jumped on it. We have one tweet from a non-binary writer at SNL who it doesn't look like even is boycotting, just making a kind of oblique statement against it. Do we have that?
Yeah, that was an Instagram thing. I couldn't actually find that piece.
Okay. Well, we have one non-binary.
I don't know Instagram. We need an Instagram
making
intern.
a statement about trans rights being human rights, and that's about it. And doesn't even make the statement that she's boycotting. The cast is definitely not boycotting. And according to Chappelle, they went over full writers' room, producers. So that's a media created story.
Yeah, according to his agent, they submitted like 40 sketches. You know, it was a normal week, basically.
Right. So that's nonsense. Now that's very interesting to me because one gets the impression that these people working in these media companies are the elites who want to cancel Dave Chappelle. Doesn't really seem that way. So it seems like the people who feel that way are an even smaller minority than we would think. Okay, so here's the closer. All right, so maybe they're all critics or critics who are afraid of being canceled. I mean, I could see that. I could see being a critic being afraid of giving it a good review, right? Like you're going to get fired from your review position if you give it a good review. So I don't even know how much of the 40% critic rating is just from critics being intimidated.
Well, a lot of critics didn't even want to review it at all because, as you can see, there's only 10 reviews that registered with
so there you
Rotten
go.
Tomatoes.
Right.
So most critics
they
just
didn't even want to get into it
either way. Right. Exactly.
Well, you know, and it's got a 95% audience score. So now finally, to show how dishonest the argument to cancel Chappelle is, Matt Orfalea did another video where he clipped together some of what Chappelle had to say about his transgender friend, Daphne. Now, this is something that they really don't want to talk about. Daphne came out and defended Chappelle and was harassed severely by the transgender activist community and committed suicide. Now, can you say that's the only reason she committed suicide? No, but it's certainly an element.
Well, it happened 6 days after the whole Twitter thing blew up.
Right. So they don't want to talk about that. And if you listen, you're going to hear, this isn't the complete monologue, but it's some of the highlights of it. How can you come away from that special feeling that Chappelle is anti-trans? If anything, this monologue humanizes a trans person in a way that 10 million trans rights or human rights tweets could not accomplish.
Yeah, so we're going to play the second half of this Orfalea montage. We're just going to play it right off of his YouTube so that everybody sees the name of the channel, because we encourage you to subscribe to his channel and support his work. He does really good work. And, you know, as a video editor myself, I could tell you each one of these pieces is painstakingly difficult and tedious and long to produce. Like it's not easy to do what he does. So definitely go subscribe to his channel. But we're gonna play the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, we don't usually grab other people's videos like this, but
well, that's why I'm not playing the whole thing. I just want to give a tease out, and then I encourage you all to go subscribe over there. So here, let's hear the second half of this.
Sticks and Stones came out. A lot of people in the trans community were furious with me. And the hardest thing for a person to do is go against their tribe if they disagree with their tribe. But Daphne did that for me. She said, punching down on someone requires you to think less of them. And I know him, and he doesn't. He doesn't punch up, he doesn't punch down, he punches lines, and he's a master at his craft. That's what she said. Beautiful tweet, beautiful friend. And when she did that, the trans community dragged that bitch all over Twitter. 6 days after that wonderful night I described to you, my friend Daphne killed herself. True story, my heart was broken. I don't know if it was them dragging her, I don't know what's going on in her life, but I bet dragging her didn't help. I was very angry at them. I was very angry at her. I felt like Daphne lied to me. She always says she identified as a woman, and then one day she goes up to the roof of a building and jumps off and kills herself. Clearly, only a man would do some gangster shit like that. Daphne would have loved that joke. That's why she was my friend.
All right. Yeah, I love that. Daphne would have loved that joke. That's why she was my friend. You know, now, look, here's the thing about that special, because I watched that special, and, you know, as someone who grew up watching George Carlin specials, Carlin and Chappelle have in common the fact that their specials are really more like one-man plays than comedy specials.
Right. Yep.
You know, where they're these theatrical works where sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're serious, right? You have to kind of watch it beginning to end in order to get everything about it. And, you know, we've mentioned the old Marshall McLuhan phrase, the medium is the message. I feel like Chappelle's pieces here that he puts out, these hour-long specials, are not as conducive to streaming as they would be to, like, in the old days when Carlin would do a special. It was on HBO at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, and everybody was looking forward to it. They would make a time, okay, we got to be home by 10 to watch this. When you make an event out of something like that, or certainly, obviously, they do them for live audiences, when you go and see a comedy show, there's a level of investment that the audience makes in the show that leads them to want to sit through the whole thing, whether they like it or not. Because this Chappelle special required a certain amount of patience on the audience's part. Because, look, the first 20 minutes of it, I wasn't really thrilled about either. Like, I did think he was punching down in the first 20, 25 minutes or so. I did think it had this sort of, like, you know, he just came across as kind of put upon, right, for reasons that you don't really know why. And then you find out why in the end when he tells this moving story about his friend.
Right.
But when things are on Netflix, like now streaming,
people are watching
it
in chunks.
They watch it when they feel like it. They watch it turn it on their phone, watch 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And if they don't dig it, or if they're offended by it, if they're put off by it, they just won't watch the rest of it. And so that's something that I think, you know, Chappelle, I don't want to say should be more mindful of. He's one of the most successful comics in the world. What does he need to take advice from me for? But I'm saying, I think that's part of the reason why this got such backlash, because a lot of people heard some of those early jokes and they just decided, you know what, this is not for me, and that was it. And I think that is a big part of it. Now, I stuck with it through the end because, like I said, from watching the old Carlin specials, I knew this had an arc to it. This has to come together in some way, and sure enough, it did. But yeah, I mean, you know, he did kind of invite some of this backlash on himself by, you know, putting a special like this out on a streaming platform to a very short attention span audience. And now look, the Rotten Tomatoes scores 95% positive, right? Most people loved it. But he did an hour's worth of material before getting to that story at the end. And so not everybody saw that. And certainly the media is not going to center that. I mean, this is another thing that we've been talking about throughout this segment. The media, once you get on their bad side, they just shit on you whenever they can for whatever reason. That whole thing where he got in trouble for opposing a low-income housing project in his hometown. He lives somewhere in Ohio. I forget the exact name of the town.
Yeah, it's like in some hippie town. He always
describes
it as.
So he was going to make some business investments in the town, and then there was this footage of him at a town hall saying that if they approve these housing projects, that he will pull his investment. And everybody called him this, you know, NIMBY guy. Oh, you don't want low-income housing units in the area. Turns out the housing development project in question was like something like, I don't have these exact numbers here, and I should, but I don't. It was almost 300 units. Only about a couple dozen of them were designated for low income, which is something that like real estate guys do all the time. Like these big real estate companies, they'll build a huge luxury project and they get tax breaks for putting low income housing units inside these big luxury projects. My cousin qualified for one. She lived on 39th between 8th and 9th Avenue in New York City. She was a bartender, so she had low income or low on the books income, right? But anyway, she was able to get into one of these units with doorman, building, swimming pool, gym, nursery in there, right? And they put that shit in there because, obviously there's a tax incentive for them to do that. Right. And so that seemed like it was the same thing here. It seemed like the average rental price of one of these housing units was actually way higher than the average for its neighborhood. And so if anything, I mean, I don't know what Chappelle's motivation was for wanting them to axe it, but if anything, that housing project would have gentrified the neighborhood. It wouldn't have brought this influx of poor people into the neighborhood. It would have gentrified it. It would have priced a lot of people out of the neighborhood. So it was completely upside down. Once you get on the media shit list, they don't care what's true about you and what's not true.
Of course. Well, we come full circle, man. I mean, they manufacture these narratives. And this is why people who get their news that way are so uninformed and ignorant. Do you know how many people I've seen who are in the arts? This is what kills me. Who jumped right on the Dave Chappelle banning thing? How can you? How can you? As an artist, don't you know you're next, you stupid motherfucker? Right. Don't you know once you open this door, what do you think, the left is always going to be in control of sensibilities in the media? What happens when you've opened this door and the right is back in control of media sensibilities? They're going to fucking ban you, you fucking moron. They all lined right up with the Joe Rogan bullshit. Another person who has heterodox views that you cannot define as right-wing. And it wouldn't matter if you could. That is not the way to handle it. Unless he's threatening people, that's it. It's fucking speech. You leave it alone. You disagree with it. You argue with it. You don't ban it. You don't deplatform it. And I say once again, all these people will try to say the internet is a unique threat. Go get a book called Days of Rage about all of the radical groups running around assassinating cops and blowing up buildings in the 70s. Over 2,000 domestic bombings a year in 1970 and 1971. So don't tell me the internet is a unique threat. It is not by the numbers causing more political violence and unrest than we had without it back then.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And one more point I want to make on this segment here, because one of the other, points about Chappelle, punching down, and obviously Daphne said she didn't think he did punch down in her mind. I think this is something that I think a lot of comedians, when they achieve a certain level of success, kind of struggle with, and sometimes it comes through in their act in ways that they might not perceive it to. Because look, a lot of comics have dark minds, right? Without getting too morbid, Lenny Bruce, Robin Williams, right? Sure. Obviously, a lot of comics. I mean, Carlin himself struggled with drugs and alcoholism for much of his life. A lot of the great comics have. So when they talk about marginalized groups, or sometimes you'll hear comics talk, riff on homeless people or riff on drug addicts and junkies and shit like that, they don't really see that as punching down because they see themselves as troubled in the same way, especially if they came up from the bottom. They spent years, renting, shoebox apartments in New York City and barely scrounging together the money for rent. And so they see themselves as sort of part of that community still, even though they're not anymore. Now they're fucking millionaires. And they don't realize that to an audience, it's not funny watching a millionaire make fun of a drug addict or a millionaire make fun of a homeless person. Like, it's just, it doesn't work. It's not funny. And I think a lot of comics lose that perspective sometimes because they think it, their minds, they're still, even if they're rich, a lot of these guys are fucked up, I mean, I mean, look at our show. We're not successful, but we have kind of dark, morbid senses of humor, right? I mean, it's just like part of having a comic mind is, I mean, part of what comedy is processing of tragedy and processing of pain. That's what makes good comedy more often than not. And so, that's just another note I would add there. Because a lot of comics do this. A lot of comics will go there and it was funny when they were working, 2 a.m., bar gigs, down around the corner from their studio apartment. And it's not funny when you're being chauffeured there in a fucking Escalade from your mansion to go there and, shit on homeless, make fun of people who are lower in society than you are.
That can be difficult, and sometimes you see successful comics try to get around that by making their routine about being rich, about how their lives have changed. It never really works.
Right.
Nobody really wants to hear it. It's not relatable.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's a little interesting at first to hear a guy who doesn't come from that talking about how their life changed, but man, you don't really want to. You can't build your whole shtick around that.
The only guy I know who pulls that off is Chris Rock. Like, he pulls that off well. He does all these bits about how, what I think he did a bit. I hope I'm getting the parents right. He's like, my father got sick when I was poor and he died very quickly. And then my mother got sick when I was rich. And damn, I went to the hospital. It was like, he made this whole bit of that,
that's a funny bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, what you're saying, this is also why comics tend to come out of communities with tragic histories. Jews, Irish, Black produce a lot of comedians, right? They all come from these communities where, I mean, that's part of how you deal with the horrors, right? I mean, Jews are notorious for having this very gallows humor, right?
Yeah.
And that was how they dealt with it in the ghetto.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Irish, same thing. I think I'm going to see that new Martin McDonagh movie tomorrow, The Banshees of Inisherin.
Oh, yeah, right.
We should do that for our film club. We should do because
yeah.
I mean, I love Martin McDonagh. He's obviously a man of the theater, and he's done some great movies. In Bruges was great. I loved his Seven Psychopaths movie. I don't know if you saw that. I thought that was fucking hilarious. Oh, that's that movie is so hilarious. It's great. But yeah, just super dark humor centered around, with very, very dark themes, but incredibly funny. Apparently, this movie takes place on this like fictitious island off the Irish coast while the Irish Civil War is raging on, And so, like, apparently, and I haven't seen it, I'll probably see it over the weekend. Apparently, every once in a while during a conversation, they'll just hear a bomb go off on the mainland. Just kind of, and then back to the talk. That kind of shit.
When I drove a horse and carriage, I was around basically the two immigrant groups. It was like having a 19th century job with immigrant groups from the 19th century. It was very strange because you had a large contingent of Italians who drove a carriage and a large contingent of Irish, and they worked separately. The Irish worked 7th Avenue, the Irish worked 6th, the Italians worked 7th. Like, it was all that old school, old New York kind of immigrant rivalry between them. And from hanging out with Irish people that much night after night, I realized you should never do Waiting for Godot unless you can get an Irish cast.
Right.
Because the rhythm of it is written to this very dour sense of humor and this very dry delivery that they have. And unless you get an American who can really nail that, you shouldn't do it. You just shouldn't do the play. I went back and reread Waiting for Godot with what I had gotten in my ear from hanging out with all these Irish people, and it read completely different.
I bet. All right. Do we have anything else to say? This was a pretty streamlined, professional show we did. I think this came out well.
Says us.
Yes, it says us. What do you guys think? Hit that like button if you like this show. We want to put our Patreon scroll up here again.
Lenny Bruce was based.
That's true. Of course.
He's smiling down right now that you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a guy. I mean, Lenny Bruce was really the first canceled comic. I mean, they made his life hell.
Yeah. But he was canceled by more right-wing conservatives. Right. That is what is so profane to me about this. Like the idea of a censorious left, it's like a contradiction in terms. But it seems like whoever holds power turns to censorship. You know, the left were outsiders, and so, you know, they were censored. And now, you know, now that they have social capital, they use it to censor people and ideas that they don't like. It's just it's very, very strange to me, particularly as somebody who has spent his life in the arts community. I pro censorship artists. It's just such a contradiction in terms. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around it when I see people cheering on these fucking old geezer, fucking boomer Crosby, Stills and Nash, Joni Mitchell motherfuckers pulling their shit off Spotify like anybody gives a shit. And them going, yeah, woo. You notice how it didn't start a trend. And this is what I'm saying. You know what? I'm going to give it an unusually hopeful note. It's encouraging to me that SNL story looks like it was wrong, because it tells me, you know, maybe even in the upper echelons, this isn't as widespread as we think it is. Maybe even within these organizations, they haven't really been completely overrun by this. It just looks that way because so many people are afraid to speak out.
All right, everybody. Well, that is our show. Thank you guys very much for logging on. We'll be back here Sunday night at 7 p.m. Don't know what our story is going to be by then, but we will find something. So, like I said,
you know what, Matt, we got a super chat we never answered. That just reminded me from Mad Marxist, I believe.
Oh, thank you. Good catch. I didn't even see that one. Mad Marxist.
It just reminded me because he threw in a Lord of the Rings quote there.
Another one. Thoughts on Carrie Lake? Will she win? I think she's down by what, about a point now?
Yeah, Yeah. I don't think so, because the outstanding votes are coming in from Democrat favorable counties. I think what is it, Maricopa County? Yeah, where a lot of the outstanding votes are remaining now.
Yeah, and Maricopa County is just a massive population center in the state also. I think some crazy number, like 60% of the state population is Maricopa County, because a lot of Arizona is just desert. There's nobody. You know, you got Tucson and Phoenix. Yeah, I'm not seeing those results here, but I'm seeing Hobbs is up by 1.5 points. And yeah, I mean, if most of the vote comes
that's
in,
that's what I read.
At this point,
yeah, most of it's coming from Maricopa County, which leans Democratic. So probably Katie Hobbs is actually going to be the governor.
Oh yeah, Hobbs has a lot more here. I found a graphic that I'll share for you guys. See all this work we're putting in for $2.
They work hard for their money.
No, thank you, Mad Marxist. In all seriousness, Maricopa County. Look at that. I mean, huge population center, already 1.2 million votes counted, and that's only 80%. So there's a lot more votes coming in. Hobbs is not winning that by much. You know, like we said, Democrats are not running up the margins in these urban areas that they should be. And there are some suburbs here, obviously, as well. So, I mean, look, it's possible that if some of the suburban pockets swing heavily for Lake and they come in, 52-47 is not the kind of margin where you can guarantee Hobbs is going to lead in the outstanding returns. So there's some hope for Lake there. But even down here, Tucson, Hobbs winning here 60-40, and that's only 70% in. So Hobbs has even more.
It's very unlikely that Lake pulls that out.
12% outstanding here. Hobbs beating her 2-1. Out in the red districts, a little more vote for Lake, but these are 90% in, 95, 87. These are very low population.
Yeah. It looks like a done deal.
It looks like Hobbs pulled it off. Karen voice and all.
Which, you know, I mean, that's something we'll talk about on another show, because that's a whole other subject I would like to get into. You know, maybe the country's not as crazy as we've been led to believe.
Yeah.
Because in the end, when presented with these candidates, they didn't vote for them.
Sorry, I'm opening a bottle of wine for my wife.
Yeah.
This corkscrew is fucked up. This isn't the restaurant corkscrew.
All right. Well, no reason to have people watching you
Watch
doing
this.
that. Yeah, I don't know if that makes for great television.
It's a Mickey Mouse corkscrew, so it's not one of the restaurant corkscrew where you have great leverage.
No.
It takes a little while. You got to shimmy it out. All right. Well, I guess we will wrap it there, folks. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to our podcast listeners for listening. We'll put this up over the weekend, and we'll see you guys back here Sunday night.
Thank you,
Thanks,
dissidents.
everybody. Thank you, dissidents. We will be back here, like I said, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Please clap.